It was a bright Saturday afternoon in a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of day where the sun's warmth seemed to wrap everything in a golden glow. The birds were chirping, kids were playing, and the smells of barbecues wafted lazily through the air. On this particular day, the Johnson family was hosting their annual summer BBQ, something they had done every year since moving into their new house 6 months ago. The Johnsons were a typical family of 4, Marcus, the father, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a kind but commanding presence, Tasha, his equally warm and vibrant wife, and their 2 children, little Elijah and Kira, ages 6 and 9. Marcus, who had recently been appointed as the new police chief in the town, was looking forward to a well-deserved day off. His rise to the position had been fast and unexpected. He was the first black police chief in the town's history, something that came with a lot of attention, both positive and negative. He had been looking forward to a peaceful afternoon with his family, surrounded by a few friends, some good food, and the sound of children laughing in the background. Tasha was setting out bowls of salad and corn on the cob on the long wooden picnic table as Marcus expertly manned the grill, flipping juicy burgers and turning sausages with precision. He had a natural ease in the way he handled things, whether it was grilling meat or dealing with high-pressure situations on the job. It was one of the many reasons why he had been chosen to lead the department. Their friends had just arrived, mingling in the backyard as the kids ran around with water balloons, shrieking in delight. Everything seemed perfect. Except for the neighbor, Miss Eleanor Whitmore. Eleanor Whitmore was the kind of woman who had lived in the neighborhood for over 30 years and prided herself on knowing everything about everyone. She was in her late 60s, silver-haired, and always dressed impeccably. She had an aura about her that made people uncomfortable, though she saw herself as the unofficial watchdog of the block. For years, Eleanor had considered the neighborhood her domain, ensuring that all her neighbors maintained their lawns, took in their trash cans promptly, and followed every unwritten rule of suburban living. The Johnson family, in her eyes, were different. From the moment they moved in, Eleanor had scrutinized their every move. It wasn't that she had anything personal against Marcus or Tasha, at least that's what she told herself. But in truth, Eleanor had grown up in a different time, a time where diversity was rare in neighborhoods like hers. The sight of a black family moving into what she considered her neighborhood made her feel uneasy, though she never voiced it out loud. Eleanor watched the BBQ from her window, her lips pursed into a thin line. She had heard the laughter and smelled the smoke from the grill as soon as it started. To her, it was a disruption. Too loud, too rowdy. The idea of a bunch of strangers, who knows where they came from, gathering next door made her uncomfortable. She took a long sip of her tea, her eyes narrowing as she saw more people arrive. Her mind began to churn with reasons why this gathering might be problematic. She didn't like the number of cars parked on the street or the kids running around on the lawn, even though they hadn't strayed onto her property. There was something off about all of it, at least in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling that the neighborhood was changing and not in the way she liked. Eleanor felt that it was her civic duty to ensure everything remained in order, so she did what she always did when something bothered her. She reached for her phone. As the dial tone rang in her ear, Eleanor felt justified. After all, she wasn't calling the police because they were black, she assured herself. She was calling because there were too many people, too much noise. Surely the law had to be on her side. 911, what's your emergency? The operator's voice crackled through the phone. Yes, hello, Eleanor began, her voice taking on the measured tone of someone trying to sound calm and collected. I'd like to report a disturbance. There's a gathering next door, and it's getting out of hand. I think there might be something illegal going on. The operator asked a few more questions, but Eleanor's heart was already racing. She didn't care what was really happening. In her mind, she had done the right thing. She had restored order. In the meantime, the BBQ continued without a hitch. Marcus was laughing with his friends, flipping the last of the burgers, while Tasha handed out drinks to the guests. The kids were in the backyard playing tag near the swing set. Everything was peaceful, exactly as they had hoped it would be. That peace was soon shattered when 2 police cruisers pulled up in front of the Johnsons' home. The sound of the sirens cut through the air, silencing the laughter and halting the conversations. Everyone stopped what they were doing, their attention now drawn to the officers stepping out of their vehicles. Marcus, instantly recognizing the situation, placed the spatula down and walked toward the gate. Tasha, standing nearby, looked confused, but followed her husband, sensing that something was wrong. The officers, 2 young men in their 30s, approached the backyard with stern expressions. They looked around, taking in the scene, the family, the guests, the grill. Everything seemed perfectly normal, but they had received a call, and it was their job to investigate. "Is there a problem, officers?" Marcus asked calmly, though he already knew the answer. As the new police chief, he was all too familiar with how situations like this played out. One of the officers, Officer Bradley, spoke up, clearly uncomfortable. "We received a call about a disturbance in the area. Someone reported a large gathering, potential noise complaints, maybe something suspicious." Marcus raised an eyebrow, a slight smirk forming on his face. He knew exactly who had made the call. He glanced over at Eleanor's house, where he could see the curtain slightly drawn back, a shadowy figure behind it. "Suspicious?" Marcus repeated, his tone even. "Well, as you can see, we're just having a barbecue with some friends. Nothing illegal going on here." The officers exchanged glances, unsure of how to proceed. They had heard about the new police chief but hadn't met him yet. Now, here he was, standing in front of them, apron on, holding a pair of tongs like any other dad on a Saturday afternoon. Officer Bradley cleared his throat, clearly flustered. Chief Johnson, we didn't realize this was your home. We'll check the noise levels and make sure everything's in order, but it seems like this might be a misunderstanding." Marcus folded his arms, looking at the officers with a calm but firm expression. "You're just doing your job, officers. I get it. But maybe next time, before you respond to a call like this, consider the possibility that not every gathering in this neighborhood is a cause for concern." The officers nodded quickly, clearly eager to defuse the situation. "Of course, Chief," Officer Bradley stammered. "We'll let the caller know everything's fine." With that, they turned and walked back to their cruisers, clearly embarrassed by the situation. Marcus watched them go, his expression unreadable. Tasha placed a hand on his arm, sensing the tension in him. "You okay?" she asked softly. Marcus let out a sigh, running a hand over his face. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired of this, you know? We can't even have a BBQ without someone thinking we're up to no good." Tasha nodded, squeezing his arm gently. "I know, but we're here, and we're not going anywhere." As the police cruisers drove away, the guests slowly resumed their conversations, though the mood had shifted slightly. The kids, blissfully unaware of what had happened, continued their games, laughing and chasing each other around the yard. Marcus turned to look at Eleanor's house one more time, shaking his head. He could feel her watching from behind the curtains, and it saddened him that even in 2024, people like her still existed. People who judged others based on the color of their skin, who saw their mere presence as a threat, but he wasn't going to let that ruin their day. Not today. He walked back to the grill, picking up the spatula once more. Tasha smiled at him, handing him a plate. "Come on, Chief, let's feed our guests." Marcus grinned, flipping the last burger onto the plate. "Yes, ma'am?" The rest of the afternoon passed without incident, though the event had left a sour taste in the air. The neighbors, the real ones who had become friends, stayed and enjoyed the food, the laughter, and the company. But everyone knew that the tension would remain as long as people like Eleanor lived on the block, lurking behind their curtains, waiting for an excuse to call the cops. As the sun began to set and the last of the guests departed, Marcus and Tasha sat on their porch, watching their kids chase fireflies in the fading light. They didn't speak for a long time, just enjoying the peace that had finally returned. "I'm proud of you," Tasha said after a while. "For what?" Marcus asked, turning to her. "For handling that so well. You didn't let it get to you." Marcus shrugged, though he appreciated the compliment. "I've dealt with worse, but it shouldn't have to be this way, you know? We shouldn't have to prove ourselves every time we do something normal." Tasha leaned her head on his shoulder. "No, we shouldn't, but we're changing things little by little. And maybe one day people like her will realize that we're not going anywhere." Marcus smiled, wrapping his arm around her. "Yeah, maybe." As the stars began to twinkle overhead, the Johnson family sat together, enjoying the warmth of the summer night. Despite everything, they were still here, still standing, and still together. And that, Marcus thought, was what mattered most. If you enjoyed this story and want more powerful tales like this one, don't forget to hit subscribe to American Fables on YouTube, where every story has a lesson and every voice matters.